Metal Gear Solid 3, the PS2 classic from 2004, was once my favorite game ever made. I could play it any old day of the week. You know, turn on the high difficulties and do a no-kill run. Sometimes I could even beat the entire game in one sitting, while skipping cutscenes, of course. But as the previous videos showed, my relationship with the Metal Gear series has changed sometime after I was a mega fan making long MGS videos. I currently think MGS1 is a great package that's not a great game on its own, and I think MGS2 has the elements of a great game but fell short because I thought the story and gameplay were boring more often than not. That's a particularly hot take these days. But if you're worried, MGS3 was never a game I turned on. Well, at least, not completely. The game is just too much fun to have any beef with. Like, spoiler alert, this is just one of the most fun games ever made. Something I confirmed when I replayed MGS2 and 3 when the Master Collection came out in 2023. However, the video does imply that I don't think it's the total masterpiece from top to bottom that I used to, so what gives? Well, let's begin with something that even my original 2017 review talked about. God, that was 8 years ago. Where does the time go? Anyway, MGS3 has a similar structure to MGS2, where there's a brief prologue and then the rest of the game. First is the Virtuous mission, and then it's Operation Snake Eater. The tanker chapter of MGS2 was the highlight of the game. MGS3 is directly inverse because the Virtuous mission is an awful opening to an otherwise badass game. Though if you just want to hear about how sick this game is, you can skip to like the 11-minute and 40-second mark. Perhaps to distance themselves from the divisive story of MGS2, this game was a prequel set 31 years before the events of the first Metal Gear. That game saw Solid Snake infiltrate Outer Heaven to destroy Metal Gear, led by Big Boss, who worked as the commanding officer of Foxhound. But Big Boss was a traitor and was secretly the leader of Outer Heaven. Solid Snake killed him at the end. But then, Big Boss returned in Metal Gear 2 with Zanzibar Land and a new Metal Gear that Solid Snake had to stop. Big Boss was seemingly defeated for good at the end, which led to the plot of Metal Gear Solid, where we found out that Solid Snake and Liquid Snake were clones of Big Boss. MGS2's main villain was Solidus Snake, the perfect clone of Big Boss. So, point is, this series really revolved heavily around this Big Boss character. A man who created this fortress dedicated to giving soldiers somewhere to live and do what they do best without being tools of any government that doesn't care if they live or die. But MGS3's mission statement was to explain, who is Big Boss, really, and why did he end up doing all that? So you get Metal Gear Solid 3, taking place in 1964. Jack, codenamed Naked Snake, has been sent to Selinoyarsk in Russia to extract weapons scientist Nikolai Sokolov, who wishes to defect to the United States. Naked Snake works for the Fox unit on their first major assignment, led by Major Zero, who personally promised Sokolov that they'd rescue him before his research and weapons fall into the hands of the evil Colonel Vulgan, who is a complete psychopath and loose cannon, who will use weapons of mass destruction all over the world, regardless of what Khrushchev demands. Snake is also aided by medical expert Paramedic and his former commander, the Boss. He descends into enemy territory via a halo jump. All that sounds fine and interesting so far. So what's the problem? Well, the opening cutscene is just too goddamn long for its own good. Reason being that the halo jump scene is interrupted by a flashback of Naked Snake getting his mission briefing from Zero before the operation started. This is a bizarre inclusion that completely wrecks the pace of the opening. In MGS2, from the moment I booted up the game to the moment I started playing, that was a time span of 12 minutes. In MGS3, it was almost a half hour. But what's so odd is that in MGS1, it took 5 minutes. That's because the opening cutscene of MGS1 had to care about you being engaged, so it told you what you needed to know. There was a nuclear weapons site that got taken over by rogue agents of your former unit, you learned their names and abilities, and were told you needed to rescue these people and stop the terrorist plot. That's it. If you wanted to know more, you could go to the options menu and watch the full mission briefing. That was almost a half hour of extra stuff. The audio from the briefings are the exact lines they play in the opening cutscene, but they stripped out the stuff you didn't really need to know. Like what happened to Big Boss's body after Metal Gear 2. MGS3 absolutely should have done the same thing. You watch the jump from the plane and you're kinda hyped for the game, and then you stop dead and listen to Zero explain the context of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is real-world history, and then they combine it with Metal Gear fiction to contextualize the mission. All that is fine for an optional scene in the menu, but it did not need to be in the opening cutscene if it was going to be several minutes long and break up the opening action so abruptly. Here's what I would have done. While we're watching the opening shot of the plane and all, I'd play audio of Zero saying that a scientist named Sokolov wants to defect and that it's of critical importance that we rescue him for the fate of the world and to prove the viability of the Fox unit. Then the scene would play out like normal, then the jump would happen uninterrupted, and then Zero says the thing he says in the game.
Your mission is to infiltrate Selinoyarsk in the Soviet mountains, ensure the safety of Sokolov, and bring him back to the West. If we don't get Sokolov back before that weapon is complete, we'll be facing a major crisis. The clock is ticking.
That's all you really need. But it was another example of Metal Gear games becoming famous for long cutscenes, so why not? Dumping in minutes of this stuff, when MGS1 already showed how you can include the detailed breakdown but not mess with the pace of the game. But that's the other thing, I said it was 30 minutes before the game started, which might make you wonder what I mean, because you then touch down on the ground and start playing, but not really. You crawl under a log, climb up a tree, and it's then time to talk on the transceiver for over 10 minutes, as Zero reaffirms many things you already know and tells you about your backpack and the importance of stealth. But it's hard to skip this because of the fact that the game then introduces the boss on the radio as well. This is an important scene, but the intro of this character also doesn't work for me because we're then told she trained Snake. But the game wastes no time in having them get into an argument over her mysteriously abandoning him some time ago, and then a philosophical debate about loyalty and leadership where the boss explains the themes of the game to Snake. How your enemy being decided by political whims is really unfair, while Snake, at this point in his story, would unquestionably die for the president and the top brass. But then, when replaying all this, I was like, holy moly, can we get to the game? It's been 30 minutes. That's roughly a fourth of most movies just on setting up the story. And I don't think this game's plot is so complicated that it needs to be set up for this long. Are there flaws with the writing itself? Not necessarily. I'm just saying that this is a video game, and I just think it's a failure of storytelling to not be able to concisely get the point across quicker. Like, a movie would never be allowed to set up the plot for this long because that's not compelling writing. Everyone should know that brevity is the soul of wit. You gotta establish things faster to get the wheels turning and get people interested so we can get to the meat of the story. And in a game, it's boring to look at this for 10 minutes. I have many thoughts on the boss as a character, and most importantly, how to improve her introduction. Before we finally get to the gameplay, she says this:
Snake, try to remember some of the basics of CQC.
But then the game teaches you absolutely nothing about the new CQC mechanics. Here's what I'd have done. The audience has no real reason to give a shit about the boss or her relationship with Snake at this point, so what I'd do is I'd make the opening way shorter with the changes I already suggested, and then I'd have the boss join the mission, and then you can play an optional flashback sequence. Totally skippable if you know what to do or don't care. But it would be Snake getting trained by the boss. You can learn how to perform CQC maneuvers from this sequence, and it would show you what Snake and the boss's relationship was like when it was at its best. Maybe Zero can be there to talk to the boss and show what their interaction was like too. Again, the Metal Gear series consistently struggles with show, don't tell, and I think the boss is a perfect example of that. The idea I have in mind comes from that training flashback from Ghost of Tsushima. It instantly made me think of MGS3 and how this part taught me how to play, but then got me emotionally invested in the characters because I got to see them interact in the past, informing the context of the present day. This could have also been a great way to show the difference in power between Snake and the boss, because she'd effortlessly beat your ass, and then you'd probably think, thank goodness she's on our side, I'd hate to be fighting her. Only for the stomach-dropping moment when she shows up on the bridge at the end of the Virtuous mission. I repeat, I don't say any of this because I have a beef with this game. I'm just saying that the opening 30 minutes gave me a lot to think about and how to make the most of that time. But the Virtuous mission's also not that fun to play either. Once it finally gets going, this opening section is no tanker, I can tell you that. You basically have to run in a straight line to get to the facility where Sokolov is at. There's a small part where you go around enemies in a circle-shaped area, but other than that, it's very much a straight line. The Virtuous mission just doesn't do a lot to show you what makes this game so fun to play. That doesn't come till later. And the total time you spend playing isn't much. It's 5 areas and you're done, and then it's back to cutscene central. You play in this part of the game for about 10 minutes and are ambushed by like 80 minutes of cutscenes. But here's what the mission does well. It sets up the jungle atmosphere very well. This was pretty new for Metal Gear since every previous game took place in some kind of man-made facility, with some brief jungle interludes in Metal Gear 2. But in Metal Gear Solid 3, you're in nature and need to survive against animals and guards. The environment might feel like a threat but can also be used as a weapon. Tall grass makes for good sneaking, beehives make for weapons by disturbing them around guards and watching the sparks fly. It shows that MGS3 will have more of a world that can be interacted with in real time, making MGS3 a game that no two players will experience the same. If you're playing it now, you'll also have a fully third-person camera. The original MGS3 on PS2 launched with a fixed camera angle like MGS1 and 2, but the Subsistence re-release added a fully controllable third-person camera. There are some segments where I felt like the fixed camera was better, so thankfully you can switch to it with a click of a button. Certain segments just feel more cinematic when experienced like that, such as this part where you see the Shagohod in the base. But ultimately, any addition from 2006 and onward is good enough because the 3D camera really helps in making the game feel more fun overall, giving you more visibility, which is very useful since the game has no Soliton radar. Observant viewers might notice that it's 60 FPS as well when all PS2 copies of MGS3 ran at 30. That's because PCSX2, the emulator, has an easy patch that makes the game 60 FPS. I just like playing the original version of games for my videos since you can see the vision for the game and how it was intended to be seen. Like certain lighting effects and scenes like this don't look as good in any of the re-releases. But 60 FPS also makes the game feel better to play, so I got the best of both worlds here. But like I said, this linear section without many guards or threats makes a poor pitch for the game you're about to play. But there were elements in the Virtuous mission that were enjoyable. And really, playing it only inspired so much negativity from me because of how slow the story is here. Snake finds Sokolov, who tells him about the evils of Colonel Vulgan and how Sokolov was building the ultimate weapon, the Shagohod. This is a world where Metal Gear hasn't been fully developed yet, so the Shagohod is the ultimate weapon because it can fire a nuke from any terrain and go up to 300 miles an hour. Snake tries to rescue Sokolov, but is ambushed by the boss, who is defecting to the Soviet Union and joining Vulgan with the help of her Cobra unit that captures Sokolov while the boss beats the stuffing out of Snake and tosses him into the river, giving Vulgan a Davy Crockett missile and uses it to blow up Sokolov's research facility, inciting tension between the US and the Soviets because the plane we used to jump from was caught in Soviet airspace. So the US needs to prove it had nothing to do with the boss's defection nor the destruction of the research facility. So a week later, Snake is sent back for a new mission, Operation Snake Eater. Snake needs to prove the US's innocence by assassinating the boss and destroying the Shagohod and defeating Colonel Vulgan. He's once again led by Major Zero and paramedic, but also Sigint, a weapons expert, and needs to make contact with the NSA codebreaker Adam, but a spy named Eva shows up instead and she helps Snake on his mission while also spying on Vulgan from the inside, setting up the journey of MGS3. Operation Snake Eater also has a slow start, but that's because you first have to play the same area as the Virtuous mission again, with even fewer guards than the first run-through. But once Snake meets Eva, thankfully things really get going. Snake and Eva are attacked by the Ocelot gang, and this is one of the best sections of the series and showcases how different MGS3 is from previous games. No more walking through boring and empty rooms. This game is a fun, stealth action game with rewarding gameplay. In this facility, Snake can hide in the lockers while the enemies come and get him, or you can go straight for this hidden door on the ground and go underneath the building and escape from various points to get the drop on your enemies. This part just makes for a really effective showcase of what you can do with stealth in this game. If you remember my old MGS videos, I talked a lot about the no-kill run of MGS3, and so I tried to stick to that for this playthrough since I still have some of that muscle memory and skill from it. The Mark 22, the sleep dart gun, is hilariously effective. It's one of the best weapons in the game. If you know what you're doing, you can use this gun virtually like a sniper rifle. Here's how. In MGS2, you'd aim the M9 with a red laser pointer as you'd see the gun from the side, but in MGS3 it's a straight angle. To really demonstrate how it worked, I decided to capture some 4K Master Collection footage so you can really see what I'm talking about, unlike the pixelated PS2 footage. So when you aim the Mark 22 in first person, you'll see the front sight in the middle. If any enemy's head lines up with this sight, it will be a headshot and they'll be down in one shot. You can clear entire rooms like that. Watch and learn.
Move! What? Not here?
But it comes with a risk versus reward element. Because of the fact that suppressors for guns in this game have a durability meter, so overusing them can make them not silent anymore until you find a new one. But thankfully you can manually equip and unequip the suppressor, so if you're using a gun for a no-kill boss battle, you can turn off the suppressor and save it for when you need it next. Also, unequipping the weapon and re-equipping it gives it rapid fire potential since it skips the reload animation. And it tops your magazine off too. The manual refers to this as tactical reloads. It was a little harder to pull all that off on the PS2 version given how I record old games. Like, it would be really difficult to shoot people from very far away, but I was still able to do it more often than not. Which had me all like,
I still got it!
Not to say I'm some MGS3 pro or whatever, because I haven't played the game in years. I'm a little rusty, and because if you watch top-level MGS3 gameplay, you'll see some real wizard shit. But yeah, the Ocelot Gang battle is the moment the game really begins, and is an effective showcase for the kind of stealth action game that MGS3 is. And it really never lets up from there. MGS3 is a more linear game than any of the previous Metal Gear games. You know, those games all took place in massive fortresses, and Snake/Raiden would need to run back and forth to find things to progress. It was fine structure on paper, but MGS3's approach is a lot more fun. You'll run through the jungle and have to avoid new obstacles in each area. Like right after the Ocelot Gang, Snake needs to swim through croc-infested water, and also get attacked by leeches too. Then you need to avoid traps and mines on the ground. Each jungle section gives you new challenges to avoid at every step. But then you reach these tiny mini-levels with a lot to offer. Like the past base here. Enemies are patrolling the perimeter, so I take them out with my trank gun turned sniper rifle, sneak into the main base, get some Mark 22 ammo, get on the roof to survey the areas I hadn't seen before, get to this hidden armory in the back, grab the TNT, bring this to the food storage room, grab what you can, and then blow it up. Whenever you see enemy food, you can steal some and then blow up the rest. Doing so will decrease the stamina and strength of your enemies, which is a fantastic attention to detail. MGS3 is endlessly replayable because of details like that. Another detail in this base is that if you blow up this chopper, it will not chase you up the mountain later because you sabotaged it on the ground. MGS3 just has a living world. As I said, no two players of this game will have the same experience with it. And it has compelling level design to go along with it. I mean, my route through the past base is my route, but you can sneak along the ground, or you can go around all the guards and slip through to the next area. Or you can try a guns blazing approach since MGS3 has a diverse roster of weapons to utilize. But the no-kill run is a lot more fun for me than doing it in the traditional action game style, because MGS3 gives you a lot of weird crap to use to get through situations. Like how if you take this alternate route in the Croc Swamp, you can find an item called the Croc Cap, where Snake puts on a ridiculous crocodile mask, and this makes it effortless to sneak past the guards patrolling the water because they'll just think you're a crocodile swimming by, and that's just hilarious to witness. Or in Grannon's research facility, you can find two items crucial to the no-kill game. One is the handkerchief, which you can use to instantly put a guy to sleep with. It uses up ammo by smearing it in their faces, however if you put someone in a CQC chokehold, the handkerchief will put them to sleep without consuming any ammo. And then second is the cigar gas spray, which also instantly puts people to sleep by spraying them with it. If you're in a big crowd of enemies and need to put them to sleep, this is your go-to. As I said, the game just gives you so much weird stuff to toy around with if you want to try it, like the fake death pill where you can trick your enemies into thinking you're dead and then use the revival pill to get the drop on them. Combine that with the great level design, you have a winning formula. Like Grannon's research facility, it also has multiple methods of entry and escape. Personally, I sneak through this vent on the side wall and put my scientist disguise on and just walk right to Grannon's office. But there are many more ways of getting in here, and I really admire that. It's a game that rewards creativity and player expression, like when you're on the way to the end boss fight and you find this totally optional side house. I love blowing up the food here as a distraction and then sneaking in to raid the place for all the gear they have stored in there and getting out. Or using trapped snakes I got to poison guys on the cliffside on the way to the Fury boss. But it's not all fun in games, though. Some mechanics have not held up well. The controls can be a bit clunky if you're more familiar with modern games. MGS3 plays pretty much the same as MGS1 and 2, but the issue is that those games almost exclusively saw you run around on flat terrain. But the bumpy geometry of MGS3 can lead to some moments where you might be trying to crouch and get up, might start crawling instead, or things like that. It's a little hard to describe, but the controls are a bit odd. That's something I've gotten used to a long time ago, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Also, to sneak at a pace no guard will hear, you need to move with the D-pad. Tilting the stick really slowly will be loud enough for guards to hear. That's not a flaw, but then most people probably won't even know you can do that. CQC is also a bit odd. You get the usual 2-punch kick combo, but the game doesn't really explain how to hold guys for interrogation and then knock them to the ground. You hold circle and then drag the stick towards the ground. It's not hard to do, but it just goes unexplained in-game, unless I missed the radio call about it. When you do get it, it's super satisfying. It instantly knocks guys out and no guard is immune to it. It also has a super generous range too, so it's a go-to maneuver. But then, interrogating guys is best avoided because you need to press the stick to do it, and this will often unintentionally enter the stab throat command and kill the dude, ending a no-kill run. So that was also clunky and made a lot better in later games. But then I also wish there was a more effective way to drag bodies. MGS3 will make you drag this Raiden look-alike to a locker, and it's really slow and easy to get spotted doing. But mainly, the clunkiest element of MGS3 is the menu, the survival viewer. Snake is in the jungle and has to manage his health, his camouflage, his gear, and food, and you need to pause the game to enter the menu to do this stuff. To change sneaking suits, you need to pick it from the list, and the menu will tell you which one is the most optimal for the current situation by assigning it point values. If your camo index could reach 100, that would mean you're literally invisible, and 0 would mean anyone could see you from a mile away. But getting into the menu and changing options just takes a little too long, so it's not something I mess around with often. For weapons, you don't just have them all on the list like previous games. You can only take 8 weapons and items at a time and must sort through what's currently active in this menu. Another thing that takes a little too long because of the speed these menus load at. That's probably another reason why no-kill runs are my preferred way to play. I only need the tranq gun, the gas spray, the wipes, the TNT, and then stun and smoke grenades. And whenever I need something else, I can just put it on my active list, meaning I won't have to spend a lot of time in this menu. Healing is also a more laborious process as you need to use various items to heal injuries that come up. None of these are bad ideas, it's just that all this menu time can screw up the pace of the game. This is something I'm hoping feels a lot better when Delta comes out. With the benefit of modern hardware and SSD loading, I'm hoping that it will feel much faster while still being faithful to the original. After all, a game like Breath of the Wild showed that changing gear and eating food in a menu can feel pretty snappy if you design it right. But that's pretty much the only issue I have with the core gameplay of MGS3. But with level design and pacing this good, how could I really complain? Especially when the game has a roster of really creative boss fights, like Ocelot combining the best of both his boss in MGS1 and the Olga battle in MGS2, as you can use the environment to your advantage, and so can your enemy. Or the Fear. When I first did a no-kill run on a hard difficulty, I got my ass kicked by this boss fight and I had no idea how to beat him. Until I looked it up on YouTube and I discovered this crazy ass shit. Check it out. I used the fake death pill to lure him towards me, revived myself, and used a stun grenade and then shot him with an AK-47, which for some reason under those conditions will drain his stamina bar, not his health, thus being a non-lethal finish. I'm telling you, this game is insane. The end boss speaks for itself. This guy is the most tense sniper duel yet, as he'll hide in the jungle waiting for the right moments to shoot you. Doing a non-lethal kill on him means following his trail and hopefully sneaking up on him and using the trank gun or the gas spray to delete his stamina meter. Or you can save, turn off the game, advance the system's clock 2 weeks, turn the game back on, and he'll have just died of old age waiting for you. Which is another thing that's absolutely insane about this game. Like, where the hell do you come up with an idea like that? Alternatively, you could do what I do. This boss is really trying on higher difficulties, so I grabbed the sniper rifle right before this cutscene, and the end is here in a wheelchair. Shooting him with a sniper rifle will also drains his stamina bar and doesn't count as a lethal kill for some reason. In the place of his boss fight, you'll then battle the Ocelot unit again. Or just sneak past them. It's faster than doing a sniper duel, so that's just what I do. I also appreciate how most every boss in this game doesn't give you a super long speech before the fight and after they die. They're kind of treated like Mega Man bosses or something. They drop in, have a little action scene with Snake, and then they die, usually via explosion. Quick and effective. And that's why a lot of MGS3's story works. When it's simple and effective, I'm with it. Colonel Vulgan is one of the best Metal Gear villains of all time, and that's because the guy has like zero depth as a character. His role in the story is to be the most cartoonishly evil dude to ever live, and it really works for this spy thriller type story. He's cunning in the sense that he framed the US for destroying Sokolov's research facility, but most of his screen time is just spent being a brutal dick. Like when he's chasing Snake and Eva with the Shagohod, a bunch of his own guys are in the way and he just shoots them all while laughing maniacally. And he has just such a physical presence to back it up. When he first walks on the screen, you know he's bad news, and then every time you see him after that, he's torturing somebody. This one scene before Snake gets captured in Groznygrad is also excellent. It shows how Snake is more technically skilled in combat than Colonel Vulgan, but Vulgan is a devastating fighter if you let him get the upper hand even once. The boss enters and beats up Snake, giving Vulgan the chance to get a few hits in, and it's all over from Snake the moment that happens because he's super strong in general, but also has lightning powers which makes his blows even more devastating. So the rivalry between Snake and Vulgan is interesting to watch, makes you excited to see how Vulgan's going to get taken down. MGS3's story makes the case for less is more as being one of the cardinal rules of storytelling. The plot doesn't really move that much past the beginning of Operation Snake Eater. It works really well for a reason I outlined in my Ancient 2017 video. The story is really character-driven. There's the radio cast helping you and the bosses, but really the plot is just about Snake, Eva, Ocelot the boss, and Colonel Vulgan. The dynamics between many of them are really interesting and make the scenes compelling. I was just going into Snake versus Vulgan a moment ago, but then you have Snake and Ocelot, as we see a younger Ocelot being taken to task and inspired by Snake. Only, you later realize that it was Ocelot triple-crossing and outmaneuvering everyone as usual, even decades in the past. Snake and Eva are interesting to watch as she tries really hard to seduce Snake, and he doesn't really respond to it that much, instead finding weapons more compelling. The writing tried decently hard to make Big Boss a likable character, making his role as the supervillain of the original games feel more tragic, and much of it works for me. The best scene in the game, bar none, is the interrogation. It's the first scene where all 5 characters are in the room together and the sparks fly, literally and figuratively. Vulgan being a sick fuck with how he tortures Snake, but Snake not giving in. You could say Vulgan is a total moron because of how he accuses Snake of being on a mission to recover the Philosopher's Legacy, a thing Snake has never heard of, and then tells him without prompting that it's a $100 billion microfilm and that it's safe in the vault underground, while knowing there's a spy on the loose. But then, Vulgan's so menacing and such an egomaniac that he probably doesn't even care, because he probably figures he can just beat the crap out of anyone who tries to take it from him. But Ocelot was hunting for the spy, and the reveal that the boss put a tracker on Snake makes her seem suspicious until Ocelot smells the perfume on Eva that he swears he's smelt before.
Tatiana! You're the spy.
And the dramatic tension too, when Vulgan makes the boss prove she's not working with Snake by demanding she cut out his eyes. If you're a longtime fan, you'd be on the edge of your seat here, because if you know Big Boss, you'd remember he wore an eye patch, and yet Naked Snake in 1964 had both of his eyes. So you'd be wondering, are we gonna see him lose one in this game? And then this scene has you being like, is the woman who is essentially Snake's mother gonna be the one to do it to him? Well, no, Snake rescues Eva from getting shot by Ocelot, and that move is the thing that cost him his eye. Vulgan finds that to be a satisfactory amount of spectacle for one day and calls it quits. This is a 12-minute scene, and yet it flies by. You could cut the tension with a knife here. It's one of the best scenes in the entire series. After that, you get a really cool escape scene. In MGS 1 and 2, escaping captivity just meant running through like a single room, but Groznygrad was already a really tough place to sneak into, and now you have to sneak out with no weapons or gear or anything. So it's a really tense sequence of gameplay, as I got caught pretty fast and had to crawl through a vent that took me right back to where I started, and I tried to find a different route to escape, but still barely made it. It was really fun to play. But Snake's escape leads to the fight against the Sorrow. He was a member of the boss's Cobra unit, but he's dead. His deal is that he was a psychic and spirit medium. Could learn intel from the deceased. He had a child with the boss during World War II, but 2 years ago she had a mission to kill the Sorrow, back when her codename was still the Joy. You can actually see the Sorrow's body near Snake's when you wash up at the end of the Virtuous mission, in fact. But anyway, Snake encounters the Sorrow when he's in the river and about to die. Before he does, the Sorrow makes Snake witness all the souls he's killed thus far on the mission. In gameplay, this means you walk through the water while you see the body of every enemy you've killed. If you played like you were Rambo, you'll be here a while. If you did a no-kill run, you'll only see the bodies of the bosses because they died in cutscene. But at the end of it, you'll get a game over, and you need to use the revival pill to bring yourself back, which on my first playthrough I forgot that was even a thing, so I went through this multiple times before I looked up what to do on Google. If you want to make it end sooner though, you can go underwater and let your health deplete and then use the revival pill. It works just the same. This is definitely one of the most blunt anti-violence messages in any game I've played. At least, before I played MGS3, I never thought twice about the enemies I killed in action games, but this does get you to think. Even though they're just enemy NPCs meant to be blown past, in-universe they all had some kind of a life you cut short with your reckless play, so maybe next time you'll think twice about it. That's actually why, even though this run wasn't a full-on no-kill run, I still usually play MGS3 like that. I find it more fun and challenging, but I also feel really dirty whenever I kill an enemy in cold blood in this game, so I still avoid it. But once Snake recovers, Eva gives him his gear back, plus his iconic eye patch, and a plan to destroy the Shagohod for good. You need to infiltrate Groznygrad and blow the Shagohod up with C3. Once you get caught, you see another cool scene where Snake and the boss fight a little bit before the climactic battle against Colonel Vulgan. I remember learning the strats for this fight non-lethally was quite a trip, because you have to use every trick in the book to win, like how you can use CQC on him even while he's firing electricity if you're close enough, and how reloading and spamming the trank gun when his back is turned is crucial, or how you can dodge roll into him for damage. You're going to need to do all of that to win. And again, I felt pretty satisfied that I'm fighting this boss for the first time in years and I got him second try. No big deal, nothing to see here, gamers. But unfortunately, despite MGS3 being based stealth action for hours on end now, the end game kinda knocks the wind out of your sails. The Shagohod is not destroyed and Vulgan chases Snake and Eva with it in a scripted sequence that feels like it goes on for fucking ever. The only parts of interactivity are when you need to stop and shoot enemies to move on, which can be tricky with the trank gun, but doable on the HD versions. But it lasts so many minutes, like 15 minutes of chasing and cutscenes before you finally get to the boss fight with the machine, which is also pretty underwhelming. You have to stop the treads to shoot it from behind, and then do it all over again once Vulgan steps out to control it with his electricity powers. It's a really boring mech fight, all things considered. You know, the battles with MG Rex and MG Ray were a lot tougher and more interesting to play for sure. But then you get chased through the woods for another several minutes. This part also feels pretty one note. I suppose if you aren't doing a no-kill run, then it's actually a bit more cathartic since you just blast everything in sight, but trying to land headshots with the trank gun at this speed does become kind of tedious, and the chase just goes on so long that I'm really getting checked out of the game because the Shagohod chase and fight and then the escape lasts like a half hour. Eva then gets injured and needs guidance to escape the woods. I could critique this part for being slow, however I will say it's miles better than the Emma rescue section of MGS2. You're in the forest and have multiple paths you could take, and the enemies present a real challenge to you and Eva. You have to find your way around. One time they got us from behind, and I just ran up to them and used all the gas spray I had left. And then at the end I used the Mark 22 as a sniper rifle to pick guys off from a distance and got basically all of them. This wasn't a bad part of the game by any means, but when I replay the game, it's a bit of a debate in my mind if it's worth suffering through that chase scene to play, because this and the final boss are both fantastic. But that fucking chase, man, it is awful. But yeah, the next sequence is Snake's final confrontation with the boss. And I'd like to use this chance to explain why, to me, the boss is a great character in most every respect, except for the one crucial flaw. And that's because of the Metal Gear series violating the greatest principle of storytelling yet again: show, don't tell. If you want the audience to be invested in the relationship between two characters, that relationship needs to be on screen. Telling us about it in monologues just does not compare to making the audience feel the emotions. MGS2 also struggled with this. I mean, Raiden and Rose recap to each other how they met in extreme detail, but that sort of thing is always going to hit harder when you can actually witness it for yourself. This is why I was saying towards the beginning that the boss turning on you really doesn't feel like anything because you don't know the boss. And all that's really been established is that she trained Snake and that they lost contact and then he's sad about it. But showing us their chemistry from when they were in contact is the thing that would make you give a shit about them, and the fact that the mission has forced them to fight to the death. Politics turning soldiers from friends to enemies is a great theme for a story to tackle, but that's why the story should then revolve around the relationship between these people in past and present. Instead, it's here, right at the end, where the boss explains how she came to know Snake at all while he says nothing. That's great, but the meeting of these two and how they develop CQC, I mean, I would have liked to see it. It would make us feel the emotions they feel. But then another problem is the relationship they have when they are on screen together. There were good moments, I went into one earlier, and I like how Snake gets better at fighting the boss with each passing battle and cutscene, but Snake just does not have anything to say to the boss here. Like when two soldiers, mother and son, are forced to fight to the death by political circumstances, I feel like this scene should be an emotional back and forth, since Snake doesn't even know why the boss is doing what she's doing. There should be maybe some effort from the protagonist to convince the antagonist that they're wrong, an active back and forth debate before the fight, while here the boss explains her life to Snake and he says nothing in response for like 12 minutes. The boss is a super interesting character on paper, but I think in execution the game doesn't have the writing to back it up. Snake's killing the boss is meant to be the inciting incident of the entire Metal Gear saga. The moment the big boss had a change of heart about his life and goes in the path we see in later games. But the story needs the relationship between these two to feel as deep as the game says it is. If you want to know what moment changed my perspective on the Metal Gear series from the fanboy I used to be to the present moment, I can tell you. Like I said, I replayed a lot of these games in like 2021, and that's when I said MGS2 was when I was like, I'm not even really having that much fun with this game. But then MGS3 was like, this game is fantastic. I was like, why is it just not hitting the same as it used to? I couldn't put the words on it. There are these super great reviews on the games from Cave Reviews things, and I happened to stumble upon them years ago and thought they were really interesting. One might say, so what, you said MGS2 was about thinking for yourself, and now you're saying you just changed sides because of someone else's video? Well, not exactly. Like I said, I already felt different about these games than I used to, but this just gave me a way to think about it and reflect on my own opinion. It was more like I watched him talk about the boss in a way I had never heard anyone talk about before, since everyone kind of agreed this is masterful writing. When he talked about how the boss is guilty of violating the show don't tell rule, I thought about it for a while and felt like, yeah, I guess I don't really have a counter-argument against that, especially once he does a montage at the end of every line of dialogue between Snake and the boss after the radio call at the beginning. I had no comeback to that, so I was convinced by this new information and have changed my opinion to reflect that. The final boss is well worth the wait, though. This is the first time in the series where you get access to all your gear for the final boss and can use it however you see fit to end the battle. It puts everything you've learned to the test, as you can totally do it stealthily, or you can do it with CQC, or you can do it guns blazing. It's a really fun boss fight, and another one of the best in the franchise. But still, I think the character writing wasn't strong enough to make this moment as believable as it needed to be. Like, I get the emotions on display and why it would change Naked Snake as much as it does. I just wish I could get inside his head more and feel what he feels, but the story doesn't really deliver that. Once more, on paper, what is here is really compelling. The ending scene is fantastic and iconic for a reason. Snake learns from Eva that the truth was the boss was never a traitor. Her mission was to locate the philosopher's legacy and bring it back. To do that, she needed to gain the trust of Colonel Vulgan, and giving him the Davy Crockett was part of that. Him firing it on Russian land threw a wrench in the whole plan. For the US to prove it was innocent, they had to scapegoat the boss and pretend she was a traitor. So the boss's final mission was to get the legacy and allow Snake to destroy the Shagohod, and then, once both of those things happened, she was ordered to allow herself to be killed by her disciple, Snake, in battle in order to prove the US was innocent. Allow herself to go down in history as a war criminal supervillain. That's how patriotic she actually was, that she then saw her mission through to the end, even though it meant her death. And she was forbade from telling Snake the truth, so she told Eva, who told Snake. Snake returns home a hero and is celebrated by the president and all these other phonies. He started the game as a soldier who said he'd die for these people, and they sold his mentor out to save their skins, and they made him part of the show. They were never going to tell him the truth. He was meant to just accept that the boss was a traitor and an enemy for the rest of his life, even giving him the new name, Big Boss. He realized how fake these people are and how they don't give a fuck about anyone who serves them. The boss gave so much to the military and it was tossed aside. Big Boss doesn't want that for himself. That's a super emotional ending, but then, like I said, if the game put the work in to show us how close Snake and the boss were and had them interact throughout the story, it would land a lot better. But then, what makes it work so well in the final product? That's what I was thinking about as I sat down to write this script. Because I do believe everything I was just saying about the flaws of the writing, and yet, I still get really emotional every time I watch this ending or even think about it. So I realized what it was. It was the same thing as what I said during the MGS1 video. It's the music and the emotional intensity of the acting and the power of the ideas on display. That's what does it for me, at least.
This, they concluded, would be the best way to keep the whole thing under wraps. The boss wouldn't be allowed to come back home alive. And she wouldn't be allowed to kill herself. Her life would be ended by her most beloved disciple. That was the way the government wanted it. That was the mission she was given, and she had no choice but to carry it out. Her death at your hands was a duty she had to fulfill. Out of duty, she turned her back on her own comrades. A lesser woman would have been crushed by such a burden.
And what makes the ending so resonant as Snake visits the grave of the boss, leaving the game on an image that's arguably one of the most iconic final shots in gaming history. Like, I get misty-eyed whenever I hear the music or see the scene, and I think that counts for something.
She wanted to live on. In your memory. Not as a soldier, but as a woman. But she was forbidden to tell you herself. And that's why she told me. Snake, history will never know what she did. No one will ever learn the truth. Her story, her debriefing, will endure only in your heart. Everything she did for her country. She sacrificed her life and her honor for her native land. She was a real hero. She was a true patriot.
So where do I stand with Metal Gear Solid 3 now? For the most part, this video was still pretty positive, and that's because this game is fantastic. No matter how you look at it or what I could ever say about it, it's amazing. I think this game is one of the most fun stealth action games I've ever played. It gives players freedom and the chance to be really creative with their gameplay, and that holds up really well. Not every part is fun, like I don't think the caves are a good level, and the pain isn't that fun of a boss. But that's really besides the point, because all my favorite games have things I don't like about them. So that's no reason to say this game isn't on that list, and it absolutely is. It's still one of the best games I've ever played in my life. Definitely the best game in the series up to this point, and again, my stance on that has never really wavered, which only leaves the upcoming release of Metal Gear Solid Delta. And I'm pretty excited for this game. And like I said earlier, Delta really has the chance to make the gameplay come alive in the modern age. Really tune up the little issues with this one. Some issues will still be there given how faithful the game looks, like the Virtuous mission not having much in the way of gameplay. But the game looks like if MGS 3 and 5 fused together with more care than went into the Twin Snakes, which I think is a super promising start since I think 3 and 5 are the best Metal Gear games. I also low-key hope this leads to remakes of Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2. I think those games really deserve it, and it would basically be the same thing as getting an entirely new game since so much will be changing. Those stories, for how important they are to the lore, deserve the full budget treatment in my opinion. But only time will tell. We'll have to wait and see for when the game comes out pretty soon. I'll cover it and let everyone know what I thought of it, and maybe do a revisit on MGS4, plus one final Metal Gear video to close the book on the subject again, but until that time comes, I'll close by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.